Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Sunday. I hope the weekend is going well wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. A little bit quiet this Sunday morning, but still plenty for us to get stuck into in today's show. We're going to talk about Eberechi Eze, who's been heavily linked once again with Arsenal in the last 24 hours. Team news and ticks, of course, big friend of this channel who I'll be speaking to next week in one of our usual shows is reporting that Arsenal are very much in the mix for Eze. They like him. They've been watching him. And you can find the description down below. In the description down below, the link to Team News and Ticks and Patreon site. That's where he was reporting yesterday the latest on Arsenal's interest in Eze. So we're going to talk about that. And of course, we will be speaking to Team News and Ticks later on in the week. So we'll get plenty more from him on that story as well. We'll look at last night's international action. Arsenal were involved in Leandro Trossard and Belgium. We've got Kai Havertz playing a little bit later on today. We've got lots of reaction from you guys on Kieran Tierney. I tell you what, that discussion yesterday generated huge amounts of discussion and debate down in the comments about what Arsenal should be doing with Kieran Tierney. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But we'll start on the Eze links, shall we? As you've seen here, Aaron has got in touch and says TNAT reported on his Patreon that Arsenal are looking at Eze. He was at our youth ranks. He will definitely be a good player to complement Odegaard on that left 8 role. How do you think of signing Eze this summer? Only issue now is that Elise has gone to Bayern. Palace will come strong for Eze. Surely they don't want to lose 2 quality players in one transfer window. And how do you view the possibility of using ESR and Nketiah or Nelson as a trade player in this kind of PL to PL club deals? Palace surely loves Nketiah and also holds interest in ESR and Nelson. They will want to replace Elise and Eze with certain players. Yeah, you could certainly throw those things into the mix. One thing that I'll note there is that Eze's got a release clause, so Palace don't really have too much say in the matter. If someone triggers that release clause, just like they're doing with Bayern signing Elise, then there's very little that Crystal Palace can do. So although they won't want to lose both those players in the window, they don't really have too much say in the matter. I don't know quite how it works, I have to admit, when it comes to triggering release clauses, if you're trying to include swap players in, if you're trying to include some sort of swap deal in that. I imagine the release clause is usually about sort of cash and a large chunk of it up front. That's what Team News and Ticks are reporting with Eze's release clause. It's around the sort of £60 million mark, but quite a large chunk of it needs to be paid up front. So if you're trying to put players involved in a sort of swap deal in that, it might complicate things. You might have to negotiate with Crystal Palace differently. Rather than paying the actual release clause, you might have to negotiate with Palace if you want to include swap players. But we know they do like Eddie Nketiah, have done for years. Strong interest in Emil Smith-Rowe from Crystal Palace this summer as well. And like you said, Reece Nelson is a player who's available that Palace have been linked with. They've just lost Elise. He could be losing Eze, so he could tick boxes for them as well. So there is scope for some sort of swap deal to be discussed between the clubs, but whether Arsenal actually do it and Palace actually want to do that, we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of what I think of Eze, I think he's a fantastic talent, huge talent. I think it'd be great for Arsenal. Like you said, he can play in one of those left 8 roles. You would think you drop Rice back to 6. Or you could play Partey and Jorginho at 6, obviously, and then you could have Eze and Odegaard playing next to each other, or you could have one of them playing and the other one rested. You could put Rice up to 8 alongside one of them, and it's just huge amount of options for Arsenal there. He's a real top quality player, and he ticks a lot of the boxes for what Mikel Arteta and what Edu like in their players. The age range is perfect. Obviously, he's homegrown. He knows the Premier League really, really well. He can come in and hit the ground running. He's got friends in the Arsenal squad already. And he's, like you said, he was at Arsenal when he was very, very younger as well. So there is a links with the clubs there already. So look, it makes a lot of sense to me. He's a real top quality player. I'm sad that Arsenal didn't go for Elise. I thought he would have been a real sort of X factor type player for Arsenal. But I think when you look at Eze and how he plays and maybe his character as well, I think he maybe fits a Mikel Arteta player a little bit better than maybe Michael Elise does. But huge talent. And it's certainly a transfer that I could get behind if it ends up materialising. But look, he's at the Euros at the moment. Nothing's going to happen until after the Euros. Gareth Southgate made it very, very clear that he doesn't want any sort of transfer activity disrupting things in the England camp. So whether this happens, whether this grows any legs and actually starts to get some momentum, we'll have to probably wait until after the Euros. But it's certainly an interesting link. And one that I would absolutely get behind should it happen. But let me know your thoughts on it, please, in the comments below. Eberechi Eze to Arsenal, discuss. Yay or nay? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, quickly looking at last night's international action and tonight, of course, really big game actually tonight with Switzerland versus Germany. Really looking forward to that. Should be an absolute belter. Leandro Trossard, that was not the greatest of cameos from Trossard when he came on. He didn't start the game against Romania for Belgium. It came on about half an hour to go in the second half. Not the greatest performance. A couple of moments when he got in down the right, where if he'd got his head up earlier and played the ball across, kind of similar. If you think back to Trossard in that game at the Etihad last season, when with about 5 minutes to go, he went away down the left and he had Martinelli in oceans of room on the right-hand side, but he took a poor first touch and probably should have looked to just get the ball across straight away or just take a better first touch. But he got it wrong and then ended up having to have a shot. And he there was similar situations, but on the opposite flank yesterday when twice he got down the right and then took a touch where maybe he didn't need to. And by the time he tried to get the ball over, he got it all wrong and Romania cleared. So it wasn't the best of cameos from Trossard, but it was a good win for Belgium. Another win, well, an important win for them after their defeat against Slovakia as well. And that's a really exciting group, actually. And that was a really good game, as most of them have been in the Euros. Like I said, Kai Havertz in action a little bit later on today. We've got to wait till 8 o'clock now because it's the final round of fixtures of the group. So no daytime games for us to get stuck into. Got to wait till 8 o'clock for Scotland's game. Big game for them. Of course, no Kieran Tierney, which we'll speak about a little bit later on in the show because of that injury. Kai Havertz up against Granit Xhaka's Switzerland. That should be one hell of a game. If Germany win that, they'd have won all 3 of their group games. And I think that'd be the first host nation to do that in a long, long time. And they've certainly been very, very impressive this so far in this campaign. But this will be a real test for them because Switzerland are a good team. I do like Switzerland. And really looking forward to that game. Elsewhere, Arthur Okwonko, who we knew was leaving Arsenal, he'd already done his sort of emotional leaving post. He has now signed permanently for Wrexham, where he had such a good loan spell last season. Obviously gone on a free, out of contract, gone on a free. Arsenal didn't get any money for him, which does sting a little bit. I don't really know the ins and outs of what happened with Okonkwo last season, why he was sent out on loan without signing a new contract. Well, not without signing a new contract because he wasn't going to sign a new contract. But then you just think, well, I don't know. It's a tough one because if you know he's not going to sign a new contract, he's still got a year left on his deal. It's like, well, what do you do? Do you send him out on loan still, or do you just keep him around just to play in the under-21s? I suppose you do have a bit of a responsibility to the player that even though he's not going to sign a new deal, you don't really want to just kill a year of his career by keeping him stuck at under-21s level because he's a really popular boy. He's been there since a kid. So maybe you do have a bit of responsibility to the player as well. And that's why they thought, okay, you can go out on loan and have a good season before you leave on a free at the end. Obviously, the move has caused quite a bit of frustration. I've had comments and questions from it here. Trey here says, at some point, you have to speak it as it is. Young players do not see a pathway and it does not look good. Imagine losing all of our best young talents and you keep defending Arteta. I don't keep defending Arteta. But I don't think that's even true. What best young talents of Arsenal lost? Yes, it's frustrating. Cozy Dubry going, absolutely. But Arsenal were trying to keep him for a year. It's not like they've just waved a white flag and let him go. But who else have they lost? Who are their best talents? I don't know really. I'm trying to think off the top of my head who has gone. Who are Arsenal's best young talents? Their best young talents in the current group. Cozy Dubry may be one of them, but then Ethan has stayed, signed a new contract. Miles Lewis-Skelly stayed and signed a new contract. So I don't know who their best young talent is. If you're talking about someone like Raul Walters, Raul Walters is a decent player, but no one's shedding any tears, I don't think, about Raul Walters going. Arsenal would have liked to have kept him around and maybe got some money out for him. But, do you think Raul Walters is going to go on and make Arsenal really worry about him leaving? I mean, he plays right back and Arsenal have got Ben White, Takehiro Tomiyasu, Yuri and Timber, and where's Raul Walters going to fit into that? So it's not like they've lost their best young talent. The frustrating thing is they didn't get any money for him, but he was in the last year of contract, wasn't going to sign. So it's not that I'm defending Arteta. I've said many a times last season there were opportunities that Arteta wasted in giving a couple of kids some game time, and that is an important thing to do because you've got to show a bit of a pathway. Raul Walters was one of those. I thought in the European game away at PSV, wasn't it? It was a real wasted opportunity. But I'm not sure just a 25-minute cameo against PSV is going to keep Mario Cozier-Dubry at the club. I really don't. There's one from what's that? I can't even see that. Ill name is this account. I'm not sure what that is. Losing Okonkwo, Raul Walters, and Cozier-Dubry for nothing is poor form by Arsenal. The club 100% needs to address this issue, and that's more of the thing that I'm worried about. Is that Arsenal should be getting some money for those players. It's difficult though when they don't want to sign a new contract, and all three of those were offered new contracts, and none of them signed it, and none of them stayed. So it's very hard when you're in that position. Clubs. I think we feel it because we're obviously concentrating on Arsenal, but you go everywhere else. And all the clubs lose talented young teenagers a lot, especially now. It's not just Arsenal that this happens to; it happens to a lot of clubs. But I think obviously because we're Arsenal fans and we follow the club more, we focus more on those things. But I agree. Look, you should be making money out of Okonkwo, Walters, and Cozy Dubry. It's something that Arsenal need to look at. They need to try and find a way, and whether that is, Mikel showing more opportunity, giving more of opportunities. But it's a fine line, isn't it? Because it's like on one hand, you want to compete and you want to try and win the league and you want to go as far as you are in the Champions League. And so you want to play your best players. But on the other hand, how do you keep some of the real sort of young kids happy and keep them at the club? It's tough, and that's why I'm always just a bit like, I've been around so long following Arsenal. I've seen so many supposed wonder kids leave the club. This is what happened way before Mikel Arteta. It happened during Wenger, way before. Go back to, it just happens so often. I've seen so many players that everyone's fuming about when they go, thinking he's going to be an absolute superstar elsewhere. And it very, very rarely happens. When it does, sometimes you just have to accept it and move on. But it very, very rarely does happen. Good luck to the three of those players. I do hope they go on and make successful careers out of it. But I have to admit, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over this happening. And I'd much rather Arsenal lose some, not be able to keep these sort of players than what back in the day when they wouldn't be able to keep their senior first team players and they all went looking for elsewhere. But that's not happening now. Arsenal's best players are staying and signing new contracts. And that, for me, shows that the club is in a much better place now than maybe it was 10 years ago when they could keep the young players, but all the senior players wanted to move elsewhere because they didn't think they could achieve what they wanted to achieve at Arsenal. That doesn't happen anymore. Right, moving on to Kieran Tierney. Got one from Charles here. It says, Tierney's injury may actually be a blessing in disguise for Arsenal next season. Given this injury, I don't see any major club giving him a serious look in this window, but I still think he's the best Arsenal's got when it comes to attacking the line and putting dangerous crosses in. This is the sort of player that Arsenal missed in those tight games when teams sit back and park the bus. Dominic says something similar. He says, I love Tierney as a player, but I was all for selling him this summer due to injuries. But selling Tierney now would be nigh on impossible this summer. And I wonder if Edu and Arteta will now look to sign it. Now look to not sign a left back and use Tierney for this year and revisit in next year when maybe Hato is available. I mean, it's an interesting discussion point. If he is literally going to be impossible to sell this summer because of the injury, and we don't know how long this injury is going to be out for. I still think the most likely scenario is he'll probably end up going out on loan, I have to say. But it is an interesting discussion point. Is it, well, if you can't sell him, why don't you just keep him and use him? Especially, you could get, even if you get 15, 20 games out of Kieran Tierney, and you do have the option of bringing on that sort of natural left-sided player, the old school type fullback, could be an interesting option. I just don't really see it happening, though. That's the thing. It seems like a very realistic proposition, and I'm not surprised. And you're not the only two people who've got in touch and said this sort of thing. I'm not surprised people are sort of raising the subject and the possibility of it happening. But I'd just be very surprised if it's something that Mikel Arteta would do. And I think Kieran Tierney absolutely would want to go anyway. And his preference, if he comes back from this hamstring and does, we've still got 3 months, two and a bit months until the transfer window shuts at the end of August. So there's still plenty of time. You'd hope if he does come back after sort of 6 weeks, 2 months maybe from this injury, that a loan spell can be found towards the end of the window. And I still think that's what Kieran would prefer. And I still think that's probably what Arsenal would prefer as well. But it's definitely a possibility. And like I said, you're not the only two people who have got in touch. I mean, other people have got in touch saying that we should just cancel his contract now, pay it up 2 years early because of the injuries and just move on. Quite a few people have got in touch and said that as well. So there's a different wide range of opinion when it comes to Kieran Tierney, reading the comments yesterday. Here's one from Nick. Says, we need to do better in terms of rotation and bringing players through. We need a squad of 30 and at least 6 of them should be youth players. If you want to produce a dynasty period, we need to bring players through. Look at us in United in the heyday we brought through. We did, but I think times have changed a little bit, and I definitely don't think you need a squad of 30. Absolutely. You go and ask Pep Guardiola, the greatest manager about, if he wants a squad of 30, and he would say absolutely no chance. Not in a million years would he want a squad that sort of big. That's the sort of size squad that Arteta inherited that just caused problem after problem because so many people aren't playing and you just can't give minutes to that sort of people. You want your squad around the sort of 22, 23, maybe, and that's including youth players. I think you probably want sort of first team senior players of around 17 or 18 who you could just rotate, and the quality is not, if there isn't that much of a dip, and that's where Arsenal aren't. They're not there yet. I think they need sort of 17, 18 players who are all first team level that you can rotate and bring out, and the quality stays at the same sort of level. But yeah, 30 for me, Nick, I can't agree with that. I think that is far too high. That sort of Chelsea level and all the problems that caused, having those sort of numbers in and around the squad. But yeah, I mean, as we spoke about earlier on in the video, in terms of rotation and bringing young players through, certainly a scope for improvement in that. And I would definitely love to see this season, at least, Ethan getting regular, not regular starts by any means, but certainly getting some decent minutes this season. And that will certainly show again that the pathway is there. And if you're good enough, then you can make it in this Arsenal team, even with the sort of new standards they are setting and the ambitions that they are targeting as well. Here's just one to finish on. Fortune UK says, hey, Charles, are you keeping an eye on these ludicrous and inflated transfers between Chelsea, Villa and potentially Everton and Newcastle? Surely the FA needs to crack down on it. These teams have essentially created a mafia, as it means to navigate FFP. Yeah, everyone's talking about cartels at the moment, isn't it? It seems to be the word in football. Look, it's mad. It's mad. But if they're not breaking rules, I don't know what the FA can do about it at the moment. I mean, there's some of the deals are just making me laugh. And you've seen that I'd honestly not even heard of the Aston Villa player that Chelsea are now going to be signing for £20 million a week after Maatsen has gone to Aston Villa for 35 million. Obviously, we're seeing it with other deals. Villa are doing them. Newcastle and Everton look like they're going to be doing something for Dominic Calvert-Lewin and other players. And all the PSR threatened clubs are working together with these deals that are, although not technically swapped, they're separate deals, but they're all at prices that, and they'll be rushed through before the end of June as well, before the June 30 deadline. So it's obvious what's going on. Everyone can see it, but I don't think they're breaking any rules. And so I'm not sure there's anything that the FA can do about it right now. But maybe further down the line, they can bring in regulation, or the Premier League can bring in regulation that stops this sort of thing happening. But for now, if the rules aren't being broken, then there's very little that the authorities can do. But I'm sure they're looking at it all very, very closely. All right, that's it from me, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. Have a very good end to your weekend. Enjoy the football later, and I'll be back tomorrow once again to talk all things Arsenal. Have a good one. Bye-bye.